Welcome back, SPC listeners. I'm really sorry for the long absence, but it turns out becoming a full-time flight instructor while also working in technology in another job and figuring out how to be good at that whole flight instruction thing makes a lot of other things in my life head to the back burner. But I couldn't wait on this one. We're again reaching into the archives, but from a different podcast and a different time. But it's timely because of the tragic events of this past weekend. I hope you love this blast from the past.
Chandler Tower, Cherokee 4121 Tango is at Chandler Air Service. We have Zulu, and we'd like a south departure, please.
What does it take to be an angel? Where does the sun go when it sleeps?
Okay, so this past weekend, we lost one of the greats from the airshow circuit and from aerobatic competition in Rob Holland. But this episode is not about the tragic accident that took his life, but rather a fond personal memory when Kent, Tiffany, and I interviewed Rob for the Pilotcast way back in 2018. I figured since the Pilotcast is no longer being hosted anywhere anymore, and the audio is effectively lost from the podosphere, I'd stick it back in. And I'd do it here on the Student Pilotcast feed. I hope you enjoy what was originally released as episode 90 of the Pilotcast, re-released here as episode 83 of the Student Pilotcast. Listen to Rob Holland give us a glimpse into the process and the preparation of one of the greatest of all time. The episode is included here in its entirety, including the intro, the music, and the outro of the old Pilotcast. A welcome blast from the past, if you ask me. Enjoy.
Welcome to another episode of the Pilotcast, episode 90. This is Pilot Tiffany.
Pilot Bill.
And Pilot Kent.
And today we have a special guest, Rob Holland.
Yeah, so I think we're maybe on the path to having new call signs because, you know, after this whole muting us for like 8 years, Bill is heretofore called Buttons. But, you know, we had a little bit of a debacle scheduling tonight's episode. Tiffany was having trouble with time zones and math and tried to clarify something and actually made it worse. So I think we're going to have to call Tiffany Breitling. And here's why. She looks really good, and everybody wants her because she looks good, but nobody should be using her to tell time on a daily basis.
You know,
I knew it fit, but I didn't realize you had a whole backstory, Kent. That's great.
look, I'm gonna put this out there right now. If anyone out there from Breitling is listening, I would be more than happy to wear your watch. All right, Kent, you're gonna get one here really soon.
Yeah, I just have to do something stupid, I guess.
Well, hey, our next podcast is coming up soon, so. Actually, what's your wife's phone number?
Oh boy.
She's probably got a list going, so.
Yeah, no kidding.
So we've got a special treat today. We've got Rob Holland with us to talk about some of his aerobatic flying. Rob is an airshow pilot and a champion aerobatic pilot. He's IAC and U.S. National Aerobatic Championship, and I believe that's 7-time U.S. National Champion. Welcome, Rob. We're happy to have you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Excellent. So there's a lot of stuff that we can talk to you about, but I want to start with kind of the obvious. You've won the U.S. National Championship 7 times. 7 times in a row, in fact, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I've gotten pretty good at fooling the judges, so it's gone pretty well.
Well, it's important to point out for those who don't follow that is only been done by one other person ever to win it 7 times, and you've got an opportunity to break that record coming up here in the fall. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I'm going to practice hard this year and go to the Nationals and do my best. And, as long as I flew better than I did last time, then that's a win for me. So,
So do you critique yourself a lot after those competitions?
oh, always. If there's video, I'm always watching myself and trying to critique and trying to figure out what I can do better. And there's always things to improve upon. So, yeah, it's an endless quest to get better.
Okay, so I have a question about IAC and air shows. What is the difference? Because I have never been to an IAC competition before.
How do I make an analogy? Figure skating and the ice capades. That's the difference. So the IAC.
So you guys are wearing leotards.
No, not to that extent. But one's a competition, one's a show. So with an air show, you're trying to wow the crowd and you're trying to entertain and try to show them things that hopefully they've never seen an airplane do before, depending upon what your act is. A competition is about you're in front of judges and you're trying to fly the best and the most precise you possibly can. And the person who presents the flight the best wins.
And so this is all based off of precision flying.
Yes, it's all precision. Well, there's 2 contests in the unlimited level of competition. There's what we call the classical, which is all about precision and straight lines and perfect rolls and a very precise sequence. And then there's a freestyle, which is more air show-ish type flying, trying to wow the judges and show them things they haven't seen before to come out on top.
And then what's the rules with, at an air show you're flying in the box and you can have spectators, but at an IAC competition, is there a box? I know that they can't advertise, there's no big draw for spectators per se. How does that work?
It's basically FAA rules. So there is a box. I mean, for a competition, there's a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer box, and you have to try to keep everything in. If you go outside of that box, there's penalty points. But the big difference is at an air show, you can't have any aerobatic energy directed at the crowd for obvious safety reasons. If something went wrong, they don't want an airplane plowing into the crowd. At a competition, there's aerobatics done both, to the judges left and right, the x-axis, and forward and back, the y-axis. So there is aerobatic energy directed where a crowd may be. So because of FAA rules, we can't invite people to come watch. If people know there's a competition, they want to come out and watch, that's fine. But it can't be an advert, because as soon as you start advertising it, it's an air show, it starts falling under air show rules, and now you can't have energy directed at the crowd, and now basically you can't have a competition.
Interesting. Okay, so I know that you have a really funny story. Would you tell us about your first competition?
Oh, yeah, it was a disaster. It was way fun. It was a disaster.
Set the stage.
I was working for Mike Gooley at the time, instructing and running his aerobatic program at his school. And my first competition, I flew in Sportsman. I flew in a decathlon. I was all psyched up. Went into the box. I did the first figure. Totally forgot about the second figure, which meant the entire rest of the sequence went backwards. So I got a pretty good score on my first figure, and I zeroed the entire rest of the flight. It didn't start off well. And you do more than one flight. The second flight, it was better. It wasn't great, but with that basically big fat zero from the first flight, I think I came in like last or second to last overall. So I wasn't up to a good start, but it kind of really got the juices flowing and caught my interest, and I just kept going from there.
When did you know? When did you know that's what you wanted to do?
A competition, I kind of stumbled upon. I didn't know I wanted to do that. What I wanted to be was an airshow pilot. And that's always been my goal and my passion and what I've worked towards. And while working towards that and trying to figure out how to become an airshow pilot, and how to build my aerobatic skills and experience, I kind of literally stumbled upon competition by working in Michael's school. And once I did my first contest and hang around a bunch of like-minded people and, seeing I can do this sport and improve my skills and have an actual way of measuring my skill and where the improvements are, I just became fascinated with it. So I get asked a lot, do you like competition? Do you like air shows? Which you like better? I really like them equally. They're two kind of different things, but I enjoy them both quite a bit.
So I think there's a difference to your flying in competition versus air shows. And just talking to some of the other cool people on your team, it sounds like you're pulling way more G's in a competition, and then you're full power the entire time during an air show. So would you be able to elaborate a little bit more as to like how the flying differs between the competition and the air show?
Yeah, I don't know if I would put it the way you just put it. They are different. So again, with an air show, you're trying to do a show, and you're trying to be in front of the crowd, and you're setting a stage, and you're presenting a show to them. So you're doing whatever it takes to put each figure exactly where it needs to be in the box, present right with the crowd, and show it the best you can to be entertaining. Competition actually has a lot of the same elements because you're trying to present to the judges, and you have a set box. But it's a lot more precise. It's a lot more, I don't want to say more aggressive, but more assertive. So it is a little bit harder pulls. And, if you're going to pull to a vertical line, and then you got to push to a vertical line, the push has to look the same as the pull, so it's really hard pushes, lots of negative G. So yeah, you pull more G, it's a little more brutal in the body, but there are some elements that transfer. I always tell people that airshow flying really kind of destroys your competition skills because it's a little looser and you can get away with stuff. But competition really improves your airshow skills because it brings an element of situational awareness and precision and all that to your flying.
So you mentioned that you kind of got your start with competitions while you were working for Mike Goulian, but how did you get your start in flying in general? Were you part of a flying family, or was that something you always wanted to do, or how did you get into flying?
No, nobody in my family flies. I'm the only one. It started kind of really young. I was 3, and 2 things happened when I was 3. I saw Star Wars when it first came out and thought the Millennium Falcon was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Obviously.
So that kind of sparked the flying interest. My mom, a lot of people don't know this, my mom way back when actually brought me to the local airport, and they had a penny a pound for kids to go flying. So I went flying in a Cessna back then. I don't remember anything about it, but she told me I went up in a Cessna back then. So I think that got my fascination with flying. And then it's kind of a long story, but I ended up going to an air show, saw people flying upside down, and all the models I had of airplanes after that were hanging upside down from the ceiling. And I was just fascinated by it. So that was always the goal in the back of my mind. I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know how to become an air show pilot, but that's the journey I started.
I'm a big fan of this part of the story where you are in college. You picked a college specifically because they had aerobatic airplanes, but can you go and talk about the time that you were walking around the airplane, you're taking pictures, and you meet your first contact, your guy?
Yeah, so I went to Daniel after college. I got my degree in aviation flight operations, and that's where I learned how to fly and got all my ratings. But being at the Nashville Airport in New Hampshire, I was just walking around the airport one day checking out airplanes because I'm an aviation geek like that. And I saw this gentleman washing a Steen Skybolt, kind of like a overgrown Pitts. So I walked up to him and I thought it was beautiful, beautiful airplane. So I asked him if I could take a picture of it. And he was like, yeah, but would you rather go flying? So I was like, yeah. So he stuck me in the front, we went flying, and that was my very first loop and roll. And that just kind of reaffirmed everything I already know, that, okay, this is the cool thing ever, and I want to do this for the rest of my life. So he actually became a really good friend. I ended up flying his airplane a lot, built some aerobatic skills in that plane, and to this day, he's one of my best friends.
Wow, that's cool. It's a good thing you were assertive as an 18-year-old, huh?
Yeah, well, at least I asked if I could take a picture of his airplane. Yep. You okay with a little funny side story to that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so I think it was my sophomore or junior year of college. His name is Ned. He called me up and said, "Hey, I'm going to take the Skybolt out to Oshkosh. Do you want to go?" It's like, yeah, I've never been to Oshkosh before. How cool would that be to show up my first Oshkosh in a cool biplane? So we jumped in his airplane and head out. One of our fuel stops was planning on being Niagara Falls. We're about 10 miles from the airport, and all of a sudden there's oil in the front windscreen. Like, crap. So we land and we blew out the front prop seal. So we ended up getting stuck overnight in Niagara Falls. We stayed at the Bit O Paris Hotel, which I don't recommend to anyone ever. We ended up with like a day and a half delay trying to get this crank seal fixed. And then we made it out to Oshkosh. It was a great time. So fast forward multiple years, I get my first MX2, and I call up Ned and say, "Hey, I have my first airplane. It's mine, two-seater. Let me return the favor. Jump in the front. Let me take it to Oshkosh." Kind of like close the circle. It's like, cool. So he jumps in the front. We fly out. Our first fuel stop's going to be Niagara Falls. Get about 10 miles from the airport. The engine starts running like really bad. So we land. Turns out I got a clogged fuel injector. So we clean out the injector. I go out to the runway, just do a full power run to make sure it works. My right tire goes flat. And when it went flat, the way the brakes were set up, it actually grinded the brake line right off the caliper. So we got stuck there overnight. Got it all fixed a couple of days later. Flew out there. Had a great time at Oshkosh.
Please tell me you stayed in the same hotel.
No, we didn't. I don't think it existed anymore that many years later. On the way back to New Hampshire, I said, "We are not stopping at Niagara Falls." He goes, "I agree." So we're flying over the top of Niagara Falls, and the engine starts running like crap. I ended up with another clogged fuel injector. Had to head to Niagara Falls. So him and I in an airplane, we always have to stay at least 100 miles away from Niagara Falls. There, bad things happen.
Man.
That's terrible. So how many times have you been back to Oshkosh since? You go every year? Fly in it?
Yeah. I mean, for the past 8 years or so, 9 years, I've been flying it every year, so quite a bit. It's it's always amazing, but it's kind of part of the job now.
Right. Yeah, it's probably different flying in as an attendee than it is flying in as a performer, huh?
Yeah, it's a lot easier to get in. You don't have to get in line. We kind of have our way of getting in, which is nice.
So when you're at Oshkosh, what's it like taxiing around out there, trying to get up and go do your show? That place seems like it's pretty clogged up.
It's horrible. It's awesome because it's Oshkosh, right? You're surrounded by airplanes and like the mecca of aviation. But where they park the performers is on the north side of the airport by the Weeks hangar. And we got to relocate the airshow center for the show. And if you just taxi there, literally it's like 45 minutes to an hour to get there. Trying to cross runways and it's a nightmare. So it's actually quicker to taxi out, take off on 927, go out, practice, cross over, land on the other runway, and get to show center. That's like 25 minutes as opposed to an hour taxi.
Including the practice.
Well, it's way easier to fly to the other side than it is to taxi.
Yeah, that might be the only airport in the world that's true. During that week at least. Excellent. So you mentioned your MX2. Tell me about your the airplane you use in competition and performance.
The one I was using or the one I'm using now?
I guess the one you were using. Yeah, it's important to note that you lost an airplane recently, didn't you?
Yeah. So I started off in an MX2, which is what I'm using now. I won the World Advanced Aerobatic Championships I did in 2008. And then 2011, I got my MXS, which is a single-seater. And it was kind of custom tailored to things I wanted with the airplane. I mean, I had a lot of MX experience by then. Everything worked, but I knew what I wanted to work more. Worked with the company, and they were gracious enough to trust me that some ideas I had might actually work, and they turned out that they did. And it's just an amazing airplane. I mean, it was an airplane that anything I thought of it, I could probably figure out how to do with that airplane.
The updates that you made to it, or the changes that you had the company help you make to squeeze a little extra performance, maybe a little extra maneuverability out of it. What kind of things are you looking for there?
Just more. You know, a lot of people think less is more, and I've always thought more is more. So, you know, there's little things like we took the rudder, and I am not an engineer, and I'm totally talking out of school, but my little theory is that the top end of the rudder kind of makes the rudder heavier. It doesn't do that much work, and actually adds a roll element to the airplane because it's kind of like a big aileron sticking up. And all the rudder down the bottom kind of does all the work and doesn't add a roll element. So we took area off the top of the rudder, added it to the bottom of the rudder. We brought the rudder to a point instead of a curve just because it looks way cooler. The rudder used to have concave skins on it, which adds stability, and I don't want stability.
Who wants stability, right?
Exactly. Put flat skins on it would make them more effective and less stability. And we gave it kind of a ridiculous amount of deflection. And the rudder was already awesome, and it just was way more awesome once we did that. And we made some changes to the elevator as far as area on it. The canopy, we took a Red Bull race canopy and modified it with more glass, basically just because it looked really cool. And who doesn't want their airplane to look really cool? Modified the cowling a little bit, the wingtips, modified the seat for the way I wanted it to kind of recline and feel, and just ended up with the airplane the way that it was. And amazingly, everything that I wanted changed actually worked really well, so I got lucky.
Maybe you are an engineer. Don't even know it.
I think I just got lucky. Right?
I have a feeling that your airplane might be hard for a guy like me to fly.
What's amazing about the MX airplanes is that I mean, it's a high-performance airplane, right? So you have to have a little bit of a skill set in that type of plane to fly it. But to just get in and fly it around, if you're a pretty competent tailwheel pilot, it's a very easy airplane to fly. You know, if you want to get in and fly from point A to point B, it's a great airplane. If you want to do mild aerobatics, it's really easy. So the amazing thing about it is when you really start pushing things, you can just keep pushing. You can keep asking it for more, and they'll keep giving it to you. So it's not a hard airplane to fly. You got to watch out for some things when you really start pushing it, but it just allows you to keep growing with the airplane. If you want more, it gives you more.
Well, are you going to do more of the same with the airplane you're building to replace it?
Yeah, so I got a really good relationship with MX Aircraft. MX Aircraft is under new ownership now. There's a gentleman in Australia who bought the company. Really, really good guy. Has a lot of great plans for it. But yeah, I've been working with him. We've been on the phone a lot and exchanging emails, and he basically told me, you know, whatever things I want for the airplane, he wants for the airplane because they obviously worked. So on the outside, it will look a lot like the airplane I had, with some subtle changes here or there to it. But it'll be cool. It'll be, if I can say it on a podcast, it'll be a badass airplane.
Absolutely, you can say that. So one other thing, as we were kind of talking about your record of 7 U.S. national championships, the person you're tied with, how well do you know him?
Bill Loudsliger?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I never got a chance to meet him. He's an amazing aviator. I got to see him fly twice, actually, at Oshkosh. I mean, he was just unbelievable. He was the man. Obviously, I've kind of studied him and read about him. I've been lucky enough to meet his daughters. They've told me a lot about him. And he was, I mean, just kind of the king of airshow and competition flying. What I loved about his show is that, especially the airshow stuff, is that there's always something going on. I mean, if you blink, you're going to miss something, which is kind of how I've always wanted to structure my show. If you blink, you're going to miss something.
I think that Kent had an opportunity to see Leo fly at least once.
Yeah, it was actually my very first Oshkosh that my dad took me to. I believe it was 1987. And yeah, I remember three things from Oshkosh that year. One was the Voyager, which had just completed its around the world non-refueled flight. Then there was the Coors Light Silver Bullets. It was a four-ship formation of BD-5Js, little tiny experimental jets that did an aerobatic act. And I remember Leo Laudenschlager. And I don't remember specific things about his show, but yeah, I remember just being completely blown away right from the beginning. I mean, one of the things that was done back then that doesn't seem to get done anymore was every performer did a snap roll at about 50 AGL on takeoff. And I don't know if there were just too many crashes doing that sort of thing or what happened to that, but yeah, I remember at the beginning of Leo's act, right from that takeoff snap roll all the way through is just incredible.
Yep, just nonstop action. It was great. And then obviously as a competition pilot, I mean, his record speaks for itself. He's a world champion and a 7-time national aerobatic champion, so he was incredible.
Yeah. Speaking of...
Now, Tiffany told us also about a letter that you wrote to Patty Wagstaff. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, I almost forgot about that. What are we going with it? So one of the mechanics that used to work on her airplane is a guy named Dennis Sawyer. Really, really amazing mechanic, especially for aerobatic aircraft. And he was out of my home airport in Nashua. So I remember being there one day, and there's Patty's airplane sitting there. It's like, holy cow. So I actually wrote a note to her saying who I was, and I was a fan. I thought she was amazing, and I wanted to get in the competition someday. And I can't remember everything I wrote on the note. And I literally just kind of reached in and stuck it in her cockpit. So like 3 or 4 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, and it was a signed thing from her saying she got my letter and definitely check out the IAC and go for competition and go for air shows, and just kind of patted me on the back through a letter, so to speak, and said go for it.
How early was that in your career?
I was in college, so I don't know. It might have been like my sophomore or junior year.
Okay, so you knew that was your goal for sure. And that was before you had gotten that big fat 0 on your first competition, right?
Yeah, again, I think I talked to her more about airshow flying than competition, because I really didn't know a lot about competition yet. But air shows, since I was a kid, was always the goal. There's never been a plan B. Cause if you have a plan B, you kind of fall back on it because it's easier. So I figured if I didn't have a plan B, I'd have no choice but to somehow fulfill plan A.
I like it. Words of wisdom. So, speaking about how you kind of at least modeled the amount of action within your show after Leo's shows, how would you say your style and your approach to aerobatics, whether it's air shows or competition, differs from your colleagues or your competitors, depending on what we're talking about?
I'm going to talk very generally when I say that, because there's a lot of really amazing performers out there. But I see a lot of people that watch other people and then try to copy what other people do. And I kind of took the approach of watching other people, seeing what they do, and then trying not to do any of that. Because who wants to watch the same thing over and over again? I've always wanted to be different, unique. I've wanted to try to make my own style. I mean, I'm obviously influenced by people. I'm influenced by like Precision and Mike Goulian and the perceived craziness of Sean Tucker and the nonstop action of Leo. But I wanted to be me. I didn't want to be a copy of them. And I always asked a lot of questions. I've just always been curious about aerobatics and why certain things go a certain way and why certain things aren't done. And I would always get the answer, well, just, the airplane can't do that. I'd be like, well, why not? I'd always study it and think about it and think about the physics and the aerodynamics, the gyroscopics, and just try to figure new stuff out. Try to think outside the box and come up with new stuff. So if you look at aerobatics and the history of it, especially with air shows, it's like everybody does the same thing, and then someone comes along and there's this spike, and then it plateaus again, and everyone copies that person for 10, 15 years, and it's all the same things, and there's a spike. And when I kind of came into it, there was just this plateau going on. Everyone was doing the same thing. So just, because I'm obsessed with it, I started to think outside the box and try to do my own thing, and I just want to evolve the sport. I want to try to bring it to the next level, come up with new things, and then somewhere down the line, someone can pick up on that and take it to the next level, even beyond. But it has to grow and not be stagnant.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So it sounds like there's obviously, this is pretty obvious. There's a lot of creativity that goes behind this. And you get your inspiration from a lot of other people, but try to take it to the next level. Would you mind going into a little bit your process of trying to figure something out? To a non-aerobatic pilot like me, that sounds a little scary and dangerous. So what is your process of creativity as you kind of try and figure these things out? Is there a lot of ground time, or do you do it mostly in the air, or is it a combination of both?
No, it takes a long time. So, people, including other aerobatic pilots, what they see is the end result, right? And they're like, oh, that's really cool and crazy, and then they go out and try to do it. What they don't see is that, it starts off with waking up at 2 a.m. and going, oh man, I wonder if an airplane can do what I just dreamt about. And then it's really just, I'll think about it for months and months and months, and I'll think about, how do I manipulate the controls? How do I manipulate the gyroscopics of the prop? What's happening aerodynamically? What could go wrong? What could it develop into? What's the end result of holding the inputs in that position for too long? And you just keep going over in your mind and trying to think of all the variables and what's actually happening. And then you try it in the airplane. And if you've thought of it right and it's actually possible, you kind of know right away if it's going to work or not. And quite frankly, there's a lot of times where you're like, okay, no, an airplane is never going to do that. But every now and then you stumble upon something where there's potential. I do a thing, I call it the inside tumble. I saw planes tumbling negatively for years, and the nose goes down and it tumbles around its axis.
Yep.
And I always ask them, why don't they tumble the other way? And I got the answer that they just won't go that way. Well, why not? The airplane shouldn't care which way it's going. Aerodynamics and gyroscopics is aerodynamics and gyroscopics. So
yeah, and the airplane's not really flying at that point, right? So,
yeah, it's a long physics lesson, but yeah. But so I thought about it forever, and I tried to figure out, and finally one day I actually got it to work. I was like, holy cow. And then I couldn't get it to work again for months. And then slowly I figured it out again, and I practiced it. And so what people don't see is from when I first thought of it, when I figured it out, to when I finally introduced it to an air show, was almost 2.5 years.
Wow.
That's the side people don't see.
It's an amazing maneuver, I got to say. I've watched it.
And a lot of the maneuvers that are kind of unique and different, it's the same process. It takes a long time before I put it in an air show. A question I get a lot is, what's the hardest figure to do in an air show? And honestly, the answer is none of them. Because if it was hard, I wouldn't put it in the show. So it should be second nature and easy, so you know how it's going to end, and for safety reasons. When I first tried to figure out, it was pretty hard. But by the time you actually put it in an air show, it shouldn't be hard anymore.
Huh. That's really interesting.
You have a quote here. It's a disease to me. I'm consumed by the thought of flight. On average, how often, if this is waking you up at night, how often are you thinking about this? It seems like you're kind of like a mad scientist trying to engineer these different maneuvers and pushing these boundaries and capabilities. But if you were to cognizantly pay attention to how often you're thinking about different ways to handle that airplane, what would you say about on average a day is?
I mean, I don't know about average per day, but it's all the time. I mean, I'm
Wait,
constantly
how
thinking
often
about
are
it.
you not thinking about these maneuvers?
Well, there are a couple other things I enjoy, but we won't talk about that. No, I'm really thinking about it all the time. I'm just consumed with it. I mean, it's my passion. I'm really lucky that my job is my hobby, right? So I have the luxury of thinking about it all the time. I don't have to think about what do I have to do in the office today or other things like that. So I can think about it all the time.
Yeah.
And it is kind of like a disease. I'm just kind of obsessed with it.
So, do you name any of the moves that you have for any of your other interests? I'm just kidding.
That's good. That's the best question I've heard in a long time.
So, I do have a question for you about that process that you were talking about. You were going into detail. Thank you for that. It's really interesting. When you're thinking about whether a plane can do something that you're imagining, do you ever consult with the guys at MX, or do you ever talk to aeronautical engineers that you know or anything like that about how you might be able to do it? Or is it sort of a process you go through on your own and you kind of do it instinctively?
I go through it on my own. I mean, it's the most respectful way, but most of those people are the ones who will tell you that you can't do that.
You can't do it, yeah.
So I don't really consult them. No, I just think about it on my own. I just kind of obsess on it and draw diagrams and think about it and practice it. And yeah, it's mostly just me and my mind. And like I said, if I come up with 10 ideas, 2 of them might work.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of failure too, and there's a lot of things you figure out. Okay, that's kind of ridiculous. An airplane can't do that.
Well, maybe your next airplane can. You gonna try them all again?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe we'll see. There's way more stuff to be done out there, so if I can go up with a couple more things.
Huh. Do you write them down so you can remember what you've been thinking about and, doing thought processes in your head about?
No. I mean, like I said, it's kind of like a disease, so I haven't really forgotten any of my ideas.
Huh.
And I don't really write them down.
You are a
I'm
mad
more
scientist.
likely to lose the paper that I write it down on than I am to forget it. So.
Yeah, interesting.
It's like a craftsman of aviation.
Yeah.
Talking about writing stuff down, we can segue into what you wrote down on the piece of paper that you wanted to be U.S. national champion.
What she talked about is basically that first contest. It was eye-opening, and I realized that this is another aspect of aerobatics that I really want to do. And I just kind of told myself, I said, in 10 years, I'm going to be the national aerobatic champion. That was my goal to work on. And it was almost 10 years for the month that I won my first national championship.
And you have continued to win every year thereafter.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you about that goal that you wrote down for yourself about being national champion in 10 years and then doing it almost to the day. I mean, it sounds like a movie script, right? How much pressure were you putting yourself under that first year you won it? I mean, was this something that you felt like it's do or die, this is my 10 years, or had you kind of forgot about it until after you did it?
No, I have a pretty kind of unique way of approaching competition. I wish more people would do this because they'd probably fly better. Competition aerobatics is not a defensive sport, right? There's nothing I can do to manipulate what somebody else is going to do in their cockpit when they fly. So the only thing I can do is go out there and fly the best that I can and try to fly better than I flew yesterday or the day before that or the day before that. And that's always been my approach. So I don't get nervous with the judges. I don't get nervous with the competition because, I mean, you are kind of competing against everybody, but I'm really just competing against myself, trying to be the best pilot that I can be. It's all about self-improvement. So I didn't really put a lot of pressure on myself. It ended up being 10 years later. I was at the Nationals. I was flying unlimited, and I won.
Just worked out, huh?
Just like that.
Just like that.
Meanwhile, the rest of us are like, holy cow, that's incredible.
Huh.
Yeah.
So you're saying that your biggest competition is Rob Holland?
Absolutely.
That's some stiff competition you got there.
Well, I mean, everyone's competition is really themselves. Who else can they compete against?
Sure.
Right? It's if you beat everybody else, but you flew worse than you did last time. To me, that's not a win.
Maybe there should be some defensive flying. How cool would it be for like a combat national championship?
Yeah,
I think they do that. It's called the military.
Oh,
I was gonna say
right.
absolutely.
When you said that it's not a defensive sport, there's nothing you can do, I started thinking, wow, what if you could?
Yeah, well, nothing you can legitimately do. Not being sportsmanlike.
Sure. So what you're saying then is you're going to be going for your 8th national championship this fall.
Yep.
And you're going to get in that cockpit, and it's going to be like any other competition because you're just going to try and fly better than you did the day before in practice.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the biggest advantages I have is that I don't get nervous. I'm not, desperately watching the other guy to see how he does, because it doesn't really matter how he does. I got to fly as good as I can. I'll watch him for cues and, see what the wind's doing and whether they're getting blown and how I'm going to adjust my sequence. But it's really a competition against myself. I mean, my goal all along has been to be the best aerobatic pilot that I can be. And I don't feel like I'm there yet. I feel like I still have quite a ways to go to be the best aerobatic pilot that I can be. So that's one of the reasons for competition. It makes you push yourself. It puts you in front of the judges so you can actually measure where you are and how you're doing.
So all the air shows that you're going to do over the summer, which is air show season, of course, the conventional wisdom, like you said at the top of the interview, is that it's going to make your flying less precise. When do you cut that off and start preparing for the competition?
It's tough. I mean, air shows do help competition in a small way, basically for positioning and being able to put figures exactly where you want to put them. Because flying in an air show, if you're doing it right, it's about that. It's putting stuff where you want it to be most entertaining. So that side of it kind of helps. And I try to make a conscious effort to make everything in my air show as precise as I can to try to keep the competition skills up. But I'll take a few weeks during the season and say, okay, this week I'm going to do a camp with some people and I'm going to practice competition. I'm going to brain dump air shows for this week, practice competition stuff, and then I'll just turn back on air show stuff next week when I start doing that again. And then I'll also take a week and a half to 2 weeks right before the Nationals and dedicate that time to just practicing competition stuff, trying to turn off air show mode and get back into the competition mode. It's tough. It's not a very easy balancing act. It's a pretty kind of a state of mind, but that's how we do it.
Do you set the airplane up any differently for competition?
No. I used to, and then I realized by doing that I was kind of flying two different airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
And I would set up in I won't get into all the details, but certain ways it made like some of the air show stuff a little bit easier, but it made some of the competition stuff a little bit harder. And I just stopped. I figured, why don't I just get better at the air show stuff so I don't have to make it easier myself? Become. I think that's the better option. And then I'm flying the same airplane all the time, and in the long run, it just makes everything easier.
All right, so I know that you are pretty big on Instagram and your social media, Facebook especially, but I always see you hashtagging "Fly Good, Don't Suck." Is that original to Rob Holland, or what's the history behind that?
2011 at the World Aerobatic Championships in Italy. One of my teammates there, Tim Just, was getting ready to go, and he was kind of nervous. He was at his first World Championship in front of international judges and a lot of pressure. And just as he was closing the canopy, I kind of don't know where it came from. I just tried to be funny and cheer him up a little bit. I kind of stuck my head and was like, "Hey, man, fly good and don't suck. And he kind of chuckled, and I was like, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense, and it kind of sums everything up. So when everyone would go fly, I'd just tell them to fly good and don't suck. And it just kind of stuck. It just kind of ran from there.
Became your tagline almost, huh?
The aerobatic version of break a leg.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty good. I saw you opened up a store on your website too. It looks like you guys have those shirts available and all kinds of swag.
Yeah, fly good, don't suck shirts. Yep.
Simplest thing.
Well, now I want one.
I know, me too.
www.ultimateairshows.com.
Excellent. Always time to plug your website.
Exactly.
That's pretty good.
So, Rob, where else can people find you on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all those places?
Facebook, it's facebook.com/Ultimate Airshows. Instagram and Twitter, it's Rob Holland 5150.
What is 5150?
Well, I'm a big Van Halen fan. They had an album, 5150. But what 5150 is a California police code for crazy and insane.
Yeah. I was wondering. All right.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Well, Rob, we thank you so much for coming and talking to us a little bit tonight. And we appreciate the
pleasure.
insights into your process, and best of luck to you going forward in your air shows this summer, but also in the what I think is a very important national championship coming up in the fall.
Yep. It's a big one. I'll do what I always do, show up and do my best.
You'll fly good and not suck.
I will fly good and not suck.
Well, cool. We'll be paying attention and definitely rooting you on. Where's?
I appreciate that.
Oh, I was going to ask where's the competition, but are you even allowed to say? Is that
The national?
promoting? Yeah.
It's going to be it's actually at Oshkosh this year.
Like.
Yep.
Is it usually
Oshkosh
that?
the place, not Oshkosh the event.
Oh, got it. Got it.
Oshkosh, believe it or not, does actually exist the other 51 weeks a year. I've been there.
It's at Whitman Field in Oshkosh. It is not an air venture.
Darn.
Very precise language there. Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Rob.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Pilotcast. If you want to learn more about us, go ahead and check us out on Facebook, the Pilotcast, and our Instagram page. We'll see you next time.
Pilotcast is edited by Bill Williams, and Steve Tupper is in charge of the music. The air crew is made up of Tiffany Wolf, Kent Shook, and Bill Williams. You can find contact information for the entire Pilotcast crew and detail from each episode at pilotcast.com. We want to hear from you, so please contact us with ideas, feedback, and suggestions at pilots@pilotcast.com, or reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, all under the moniker Pilotcast. We really appreciate you listening.
Find this and other great shows at the Aviation Media Network.
TheVoicesinYourHead.com.
I am at a gas station.
Works for me.
Do you ever get dizzy? Are you scared? Do you throw up? Are you crazy? Really, we didn't want the margarita machine to turn off, and Patty Wagstaff was behind it serving, so. I just don't have good Wi-Fi at my house, so I have to come up here. Whoa, coyote! Badass.